Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and amid all the regulation drama currently going on in the summer break, Toto Wolff of Mercedes has responded to Mattia Binotto and Christian Horner's claims that there are no reasonable safety concerns with the present regulations, saying that in actual fact the data is there, the FIA knows changes must be made, but do these changes still, regardless of the reasoning, actually still favour Mercedes? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you are new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Firstly, wanted to mention what's going on with Williams, because the rumour has now come out that they expected Piastri to drive for them next year. We believe that the plan was for Piastri and Alpine, for Piastri to go to Williams on loan for one season, then he would return, Alonso would go somewhere else or retire, and then Piastri would step into the seat. Alonso obviously realised what was coming, thought, okay, I don't want to be a placeholder for Piastri, I'm going to get out of here, do my own thing. That of course led to all the drama, Piastri probably now going to McLaren, and I think even Williams were going to do a deal with Alpine where they would then have like Renault engine power or something like that in order to make that relationship work with Alpine properly and then effectively forfeit their Mercedes power engine. Those were the discussions going on. Now though, with Piastri not going to Williams, that means that they need a driver. Now apparently they could either stick with Nicholas Latifi, or the other key target is apparently Logan Sargent from Formula 2, so would be quite something really. Of course these have numbers here actually in terms of teammate head-to-head qualifying. Russell was just farming Latifi hard the last couple of years, and I mean, yeah, look, Latifi might be around for still one more season. The only reasonable replacement might be Sargent from F2. There are some other options out there, but you know, it's creeping to more and more likely that Latifi might retain his seat next season, which would be a bit of a surprise. And just to mention Lando Norris's numbers, because he wasn't on this list, but he's at 62% if you guys were interested. Let's dive into all this regulation drama then, right? So we looked at this image yesterday of, you know, Stefano Domenicali and Toto Wolff maybe having a bit of a chat, talking potentially about the regulations that might need changing. Now look, at the end of the day, Mercedes have probably been the team on the balance of this entire season that have had the most issues with the porpoising effect. Nowadays, you still don't tend to necessarily see that, but the cars still do bounce to some degree on certain circuits. Now, even though the teams say, in general, they've got the control of it. But still, even Toto Wolff and Mercedes have said if they went back to Baku, then these issues would recur on a bumpy circuit like Azerbaijan. Therefore, the FIA is saying, okay, look, we're going to change things around for next year. We're going to update the rules to a certain extent and raise the flooring of the car by 15 millimeters or 25 millimeters as was initially proposed to dampen these concerns. Now, the other teams have said this effectively is Toto Wolff and Mercedes trying to manipulate the FIA to change the rules in their favour. Toto Wolff says that, of course, is not the case, as of course, like, he's not going to confirm those allegations, but says that actually the safety concerns are very reasonable and very viable, and you know, he's kind of, well, surprised that Christian Horner and Mattia Binotto are being so dismissive of them, I suppose, by saying that, you know, there's no regulation concerns, there's no safety concerns. It's all about Toto Wolff just trying to get his own way, effectively. So this is what Christian Horner has said before, that, you know, these kind of safety concerns theoretically are a very easy car to stand behind, and in reality, there isn't really any safety concerns with the regulations as they currently stand, because the teams can learn to adapt and deal with them to make sure their driver doesn't, you know, knock their brains out, effectively, as is the discussion here in a second. But still, Christian Horner might say, and even Gasly said at the time that we'll see here in a second, that there is effectively a compromise that the teams are having between making the car faster and compromising the safety of the driver. So Mattia Binotto also yesterday said that realistically he doesn't see there being any safety concerns. He doesn't think that any changes should happen next year regardless of who it favours. But the thing is that Toto Wolff is saying here that some of the drivers behind the scenes are giving different thoughts, let's say, potentially to the team bosses. Pierre Gasly actually says here he was talking about the race in Baku, saying it was really hard on my back to the point that after the weekend I had to do an MRI. He actually went to the hospital to check everything was okay with the vertebrae. We remember we were talking at the time the fact that, you know, Hamilton could even race next week in Canada. People were saying, well, he might not be able to race because, like, you know, his back is so badly injured by the weekends. And other drivers after the race did say a similar thing. Riccardo said that it was really hard on his back. Gasly kind of implied the same thing. But also I believe Toto Wolff said on that weekend that other drivers as well were also saying the same thing, but they didn't want to say it publicly, right? Because if you're a Red Bull driver, if you're a Ferrari driver, and Mercedes are having these issues more than most teams, you probably want to keep your mouth shut a little bit, because if Verstappen starts talking about, well, yeah, my back was really hurting, then, you know, probably the FIA is going to start changing the regulations in Mercedes' favour. So the argument was those drivers had kind of been told, okay, hush hush about this, but they've apparently given their thoughts kind of anonymously that Toto Wolff is going to go on to describe. So he says there is a medical question question here to be answered. And as he says the following, effectively his argument was, like, you don't want it to turn into an American football situation, NFL situation, where players can get repeated head injuries and concussions after repetitive impacts. This has also been something that's been talked about in rugby, that the players can suffer micro concussions over many years, and it's not obviously good for their, well, the health of their brain and their head and all this type of stuff as well. So, well, as Toto Wolff says, he's apparently done the analysis, or some people have done the analysis. The FIA supposedly have had doctors talk to them and say it's very simple. We've always said we can either do nothing or do the right thing. So, you know, Toto Wolff taking the moral approach here so he can back up his point in that manner. We have, as the FIA has, you can ask them, medical analysis that frequencies of 1 or 2 hertz at 1 or 2 times per second over several minutes can lead to long-term brain damage. We have 6 to 7 hertz over several hours. So, look, of course, this is a slight exaggeration because this kind of, the frequencies aren't happening all the time, just happening down the straights. But look, if you are on the long straight in Baku and your head's bouncing around at plenty of times a second for, you know, every lap for a couple of hours, you know, over the long period of time, that is going to do some damage, right? The medical analysis is seemingly there. Going on to say the FIA has no option than to do something. Now, look, Mattia Binotto and Christian Horner might say, well, look, fix your car, and then this isn't a problem. Despite that, it's still going to be an issue in certain situations. There's no, you know, we can't all completely fix it, depends on the state of the surface of the track, like how bumpy the track is in the first place, how the suspension is designed in the regulations, this type of stuff as well. So they've been pushing pretty heavily for, you know, something to deal with these issues. And as he says, it's a medical question. I don't think that the gang around the FIA will let themselves be manipulated in either direction. So saying that, okay, either us giving our point of view or potentially Christian Horner and Mattia Binotto giving their point of view on the opposing point of view, says the FIA won't be swayed, and these reports are just a reality and they are a fact. Also saying the GPDA, the drivers kind of, you know, board union type thing, gave their statements. The drivers have given their statement on an anonymous form. The competent specialists and doctors have been consulting, and the result is that it's not good for a long-term effect. The FIA says it doesn't want to have an NFL situation as we described earlier. So kind of implying here that many of the drivers have said anonymously, yes, this is a problem, we want this to be sorted out, even if it doesn't necessarily align with the kind of incentive that their team might have along these lines. So it's always a sketchy situation, right, as per usual here in Formula 1. And of course, Christian Horner has said that effectively Toto Wolff is trying to lobby the FIA to get these to change effectively in a way to help a certain team, that being Mercedes. But Toto Wolff says, look, that's not the case at all, because you could say today it seems like we've understood the car, we're on top of it now, we have a pole position right in Hungary, let's not change everything. But you know, he reckons that his point of view there is irrelevant because the frequency of the bouncing and the porpoising that's bad for the drivers, we don't understand and can't even relate how it is to be shaken around in these cars. Have we got on top of it? Have all the teams gotten on top of it? Maybe, maybe not. We haven't been on a track that's bouncing lately, such as Baku. Do we need to have some precautions for next year? Yes, for sure. So saying that despite the fact that they understand the car, they've fixed the car, something still needs to change. Of course, look, the other teams might disagree, but the FIA does seem to kind of agree with the medical perspective or whatever that Toto Wolff has analysed and believes it needs to be changed, and therefore they're going to, well, force the floor edges to be raised by 15 millimeters, which, look, the other teams will say that is being effectively beneficial to Mercedes. But maybe Toto Wolff has a good point as well about the safety implications that he reckons a lot of the drivers, or the majority of the drivers, agree with as well, especially on those type of tracks. So it's an interesting one, like whether this is considered lobbying, of course, like whether Christian Horner and Mattia Binotto are wrong to oppose it because it's bad for driver health, or whether, you know, Wolff is just exaggerating this for the benefit of his own team. That's, you know, Formula 1 at its very best, to be honest. And of course, look, they've been improving regardless, and if the TD favours them as well, and if next year's regulations favour Mercedes as well, it does seem like they're on a path back to being the fastest car on the grid. Of course, there's no guarantees. We'll see how time progresses on that one. Just to mention a couple of things here before we close out the video. These are the overtaking numbers for each race so far this season. Thought it was interesting, the most overtakes actually came at Bahrain at the start of the season. I'm not really a massive fan of the track in Bahrain, and of course it does have that massive straight, which does give opportunities for kind of boring overtakes. The number of overtakes doesn't necessarily correlate with the excitement of the races, because, you know, like last year in Qatar, for example, every overtake that was done seemingly on that track was just down the main straight, DRS open, blast past him, and then into turn one. Like, that's not exactly the most fun to watch. There were apparently 12 overtakes in Monaco, although I think maybe we saw, what, 3 of them on the TV direction or something. 50 at Spain, 54 at Miami, 22 at Imola, right? Kind of expected. Azerbaijan as well. But we can see that it doesn't necessarily correlate, right? Because Great Britain only had 30 overtakes, but that was by far far, I think, so far, the best race of the season at Silverstone. Austria had almost 70. Hungary, even most recently, I thought this is impressive, actually, that Hungary had 65 overtakes, just because, like, Hungary is usually a track not known for that. So it does go to show, I think, the power of these new regulations. At the same time, that was like a 2, if not 3-stop race for certain teams, namely Charles Leclerc and Ferrari. So I suppose that does help to a degree with the numbers. And just this to mention as well, I believe Verstappen is now at 5 on this list, but Hamilton's at 8, and actually Alonso leads the way. The drivers that have won from the most different grid starting slots. Alonso has won from 9 different positions on the grid, one from pole, one from second, one from 15th, for example. And these are the other drivers: Lauda, Piquet, Coulthard, Schumacher, Raikkonen, and Hamilton, all tied on 8th, and then of course many other big names on 7. But Alonso actually leads the way, which is quite the remarkable stat as well. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.